Hello and welcome to today's free webinar, Story-Based Technical Training. My name is Rance Green and I am the author of this book right here called Instructional Story Design. The book is sold through ATD Press, and of course you can find it on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. It is one of ATD Press's bestsellers and has been since I published it in 2020. So I am absolutely thrilled that instructional designers are interested in humanizing training. Before we get started, I'd like to share a brief video from the sponsor of this webinar today, the School of Story Design. The School of Story Design houses two certification tracks. Those certification tracks are Instructional Story Design and Beyond Story Production. So without further ado, I will give a shout out to the School of Story Design. This is a short video. This is schoolofstorydesign.com, and this is on their homepage. Hello, instructional designers. You have probably heard many times that stories are great for training. They provide context, engagement, emotional input, action. Yes, stories do all of these things, but we're still left with a big question. How do you write a story for training? How do you produce the story once it's written? How do you train with a story? How do you get buy-in for storytelling? Okay, maybe several big questions. My name's Rance Green, the author of this book and the founder of the School of Story Design, where we focus exclusively on you, instructional designers. At the school, you'll find two certification tracks. The Instructional Story Design track is the heartbeat of our school. It's the methodical process of instructional design with story right in the middle. Everything you need to know to write a story and train with it. Our other track is Beyond Story Production. Beyond's all-in-one video creation tool has amazing capabilities to bring your story to life. The skills of visual thinking, storyboarding, and animated video production will prepare you to produce any type of video. Story-based videos? Yep. Process videos? Yep. Explainer videos? Yes. Can my whole team sign up? Are there group discounts? Do we get to practice with feedback? Yes, yes, and yes. All of our courses are designed to give you practice with feedback. So, are you ready to write, produce, and train with a story? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Count me in. Oh, yeah. All right, let's take your training to the next level. The story level? You got it. Welcome to the School of Story Design. Little disco in the morning. All right, thank you, School of Story Design, for hosting this. I am really, really glad that we have a place where we can train instructional designers to humanize their training. And that really is the whole point of instructional story design, to humanize the learning experience, to make that experience something that is respectful to the learner and also is exciting, an exciting way to learn. So when you think about those humanized instruction, go ahead and just put in the chat, like what are some of the words that come to your mind, like a word or a phrase that comes to mind when you think about the term humanized instruction? Okay, Trish says it's real. Kelly, connection with others. Yes. Connection's a big thing, right? Mark says relatable. Um, Vicky says life examples. Yeah, our training isn't really in a vacuum, right? It's in real life. Real things are happening, real problems, real people. It's these courses that we produce aren't just, how, the primrose path of how everything goes right, but there's life around um, the learners who are in that course. So Priya, not passive. I like that. Yeah, very active. A humanized experience is very active, and you'll hear me talk a lot about action. Kathleen, hey Kathleen, it's good to see you. Um, during the course of work, yeah. So it is kind of in the flow of what people are doing. It feels like, yes, this is my job. This really is my life. Whoever designed this really gets me. It's simple, authentic, conversational. Priya, thank you for those words. Heather, relatable. Yeah, humanized instruction has a way of just grabbing us, grabbing our attention, making us feel like, man, I'm a real person. And this person who designed this really gets me. Today, I want to pay special attention to a very specific type of training, technical training. And so I'd like to just hear from you. What are some things that you've done to humanize technical training? So feel free to share your video or your audio or both, or type your answer in the chat. How are you currently, what are some things you're doing now to humanize the technical learning experience? Okay, so Trish says using real life examples with tools, etc. Good. Case studies are wonderful. Kelly is producing videos. So Kelly, what kind of videos? How are those videos humanizing that experience for your group?
Just by able to see their coworkers perform certain tasks, um,
Okay.
to
So
relate
these
to
are
them
these are
possibly.
these are videos of live. This is a live video shoot type of situation.
Yeah, where they're actually doing a task. And yeah.
That's nice. And they're seeing their peers do the task. That's
hmm
wonderful. Priya using scenarios. Nice. M. Toronto, examples, case studies, practice videos, gamifications. I practice and videos. I really love that you're giving them practice. M. Toronto, is that practice happening in an online situation, or is it happening, is it like on the job type of practice? How are you delivering that practice? Feel free to come off mute. M. Toronto. Or you can type your answer in the chat as well. How are you giving people practice in technical training? We'll keep going to Katarina. When I'm allowed, I use colloquial terms for very technical trainings. That's a nice qualifier, right? When I'm allowed. When the subject matter expert lets me do this, good. That's great. So kind of breaking down the jargon so into real plain language. That's nice. Kathleen, guided practice instruction. Um, would you mind talking a little bit about that, Kathleen, about how you're delivering that guided practice?
Sure. So, let me turn on the video too. Oh, sorry, I don't know where I'm looking today. In terms of guided practice, we've usually done some sort of e-learning or or reference guide. And then it's really trying to give them instructions to use our training site. We have a training site for one of our major systems. So having them go in there and, guide them through a transaction or an interaction and have them, reproduce those same kind of results, use those steps that we've just taught them and try and get to the same conclusions.
Nice, nice. That's a great way to humanize it. I mean, the more practical it is, the more humanized it feels because they're like, oh, this person's really helping me to do my job. That's awesome, Kathleen.
Thanks.
Agnes says use real experiences with scenarios. Nice. And Kaylin, the same. Jamie, for really boring training like computer software, I've done a quick Vion intro video on how this impacts the learner before getting into the technical training. Oh, that sounds marvelous. Jamie, would you be willing to talk about that a little bit? Maybe give us an example of how you are, of a type of setup that you do at the beginning of a course.
Sure. I was really excited about this webinar because I'm working on one right now. It's for Unifocus, which is, I work for a resort. And so we do Unifocus, which is like a timekeeping, very boring to me at least, situation. So I kind of did a quick intro video on a sample employee saying, you know, Judy's new at her job as a manager, and here's what's happening. Oh no, the time cards are due. She doesn't have it done. This is how it impacts the employees. And then it kind of just gives them something visual to look at, see the scenario, and then we get into all the fun stuff of the actual software.
That's nice. So you're seeing kind of a downstream impact of if things don't go right, this is the type of consequences.
Exactly.
That's great. I love that, Jamie. We'll talk about that more in just a moment.
Cool.
That's great. Vicky, using real characters, cartoon characters to give examples of good versus not good endings in your manufacturing setting. So I love that you're using non-examples. Non-examples are wonderful because they help define the example. It starts limiting the options of what someone could do. And really, if you know what's happening out in the workplace already that's not optimal, you bring those stories into the training itself because people will be like, yeah, I do that. I get that. And you can if you can get to know your learning audience a little more, be like, why are they doing it that way? Is it because of a lack of knowledge? Is it because of a lack of skill? Is it just an attitude issue? Or, is it something that's not even training related? Maybe the machine is just too far from their desk or, there's something in the environment that needs to be fixed. So that is wonderful. I'm glad you're using non-examples, and we'll talk a lot today about those non-examples. Heather, in some of our training videos, made Vion characters to look like our trainers. Cool. So personalizing the actual characters in your stories and your videos. That's great. And Vion is a great way to make those personalizations. You've probably seen, well, you just saw my animated self. Hopefully it looks somewhat like me. M. Toronto, online learning practice. Okay, so you're answering my question from before. Thank you. So giving people practice in an online venue. Thank you. Mark, directly tying knowledge requirements to tasks to be performed so they know why they need, so they understand why they need to know something. How does this piece of knowledge allow me to perform the task? Yes, 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 yes. I am so, so happy to hear that. A lot of times, the kind of knowledge dump prevails. But when you understand as a designer why they need to know that and can apply it to a task, then that training comes to life. We'll talk about that as well today, Mark. I am thrilled to hear that you are doing that now. And then Michelle, recreating the system screens and storyline, allowing for examples, guided practice, then allowing them to practice on their own. That's wonderful. So yeah, you're kind of recreating the real environment, giving them practice in a safe place where they're not going to like, crash the system, and then giving them guided practice in the real system. That's great, Michelle. Katarina, analogies are great. Yes, they are. Especially if they're in story form, I would say. So that's great that you are tuned in to that. Metaphors are wonderful, and can be very helpful, especially if your learning audience knows nothing about what they are about to learn. If you can find a great metaphor, that relates, that they're familiar with, something that they're familiar with, and have some strong equivalents to what they're not familiar with, then you have a great you have a great metaphor. And for those of you who are interested in metaphors, the last roundtable that we did was based on that. It was called Let's Make a Metaphor. So I'm going to give you a link to that roundtable so you can go watch the recording later. I just put the link in the chat. Just bring that up on your screen for later. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see all the roundtable recordings, and Let's Make a Metaphor was the last one that was recorded. Right. Well, thank you for sharing with me how you are humanizing technical training. I'd like to share with you a very specific way of humanizing technical training, and it is, of course, instructional story design. Now, many of you have read the book. Some of you have taken the course, the Instructional Story Design Experience. Some of you have gone all the way through certification. So this is going to sound very familiar to you, but for the sake of those who are new to instructional story design, I'm going to share with you the very heart of the method. And this is it. So if we have story at the top, this is the story we want to create for technical training. This is the action that we want people to take as a result of training. Right, so our story has to be concretely connected to the action that we want people to take. But we've got this gap in the middle, and we want to fill that gap. And it starts by creating a targeted story. So when you think of stories that you read, watch, listen to, tell, what are the elements of a story that make it a story? Katarina says, emotions. Stories are definitely emotional. And that's why stories stick with us for a long time, because it's triggering those emotions. Trish says, character. Yes, characters are part of stories. Setting. Yes, that action has to take place somewhere. A problem. Absolutely. And a solution. Okay, Amanda, characters. Kelly, plot. Yep, there's this kind of ebb and flow. Priya, character, plot, challenge, emotions. Yes. You guys have used the word problem, challenge. What's another word for that? Yes, Leslie. Conflict. So you obviously know what stories are. You talk in the language of stories every day, and you communicate through stories all the time. So inherently, we know what a story is, which is why it behooves us as designers to speak that language fluently. The two essential elements of a story for training are relatable characters and strong conflict. Relatable characters because our learning audience needs to have some empathy for those characters. If they don't have empathy for the characters, the story will just go right over their heads. And I use the word strong for conflict because I want to remind all of us designers, who tend to enjoy giving people this primrose path, this, here's how you do everything correctly. No conflict. Um, but that's not a story. A story must contain conflict. And I use the word strong because I want to keep it in the forefront of our minds that it has to be there and it should be as strong as possible. And something wonderful happens when you put relatable characters into strong conflict. Characters that I care about in conflict. And I call it a desire for resolution. I want to see how this works out for these people. In my mind, I am trying to help them out of this. It's like I'm living it myself when I see this story unfolding. That's the wonderful power of stories. And sometimes when you hear a speaker or a pastor or somebody talking and they're telling a story, it's like when they're telling the story, I can, like, it may not be my situation at all, but I can relate to it and I'm applying it to my own situation. That too is the power of stories. So even though the stories you tell for instruction should be closely related to the situation of your learners, there may be situations where you are training a big audience, different roles. But if you're telling a very specific story, a person who's in a different role will still be able to relate to that character because it's somebody that maybe they know, and they will be able to apply that story to their own work situation. So, when the story has produced a desire for resolution, the story for training has done the majority of its work. So it ends at the height of that conflict. But we still have this gap. The story alone doesn't make the connection to the action. What does? You may guess. Instruction. Instruction completes the link between the story for training and the action that we want people to take. Now, you'll see an example today of a technical training course, and you'll notice that the story doesn't go away. It doesn't just disappear after the story is told. It continues into the instruction, and I'll show you how that happens. That is the story design model. So first, before we continue on, what questions do you have? What comes to your mind when you see this model? You feel free to unmute or put your comments in the chat. Hi, Berth. Did you want to say something? Vicky, examples specific for my company. Nice. Vicky, what kind of technical training do you design? You can put your answer in the chat. I'm not hearing you. Priya, you can unmute. I'm not hearing you either. Is everybody hearing Priya or no? No? Okay. There you are.
Yeah, so my question is, I'll first lower my hand. So can we use this model in some very dense technical content? Like maybe I'm creating training for a company which is in telecommunications space. So something like we create training for technical support reps who take these calls from large and medium enterprise companies. So when their router servers, everything is down, when their telecommunications network is having an outage. So in those situations, can we have something like a conflict and a relatable character and all that? I mean something
Yes.
that
The answer is yes. And it just so happens that the example I'm going to show you is telecommunications. So,
that's great.
uh, so hold on, we're going to get there. Yes, and I'm often asked, I don't know why I'm asked this, but I'm often asked, is there ever a situation when you wouldn't tell a story in training? And I say my response to this is, I help train salespeople, marketing people, anybody who wants to communicate or train through storytelling. And what I tell everybody about business storytelling in general is the only time you need a story is if change is needed. If a change needs to happen, then a story is appropriate. And training inherently requires change, either behavior change, performance change. So a training will benefit from storytelling. Now, if you are doing training in the flow of work and they want to know, what button do I press? At that point, a story is probably not going to be appreciated if all they need to know is which button to press. So, but if you are designing a course, a story will always benefit the training. So, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And Priya, you are fortunate because it is from the telecommunications sector. Vicky, thank you for providing an answer to my question. Precision manufacturing, not commonly used anywhere else. Very specific, intricate parts. Nice. Berth says, I'd like to design better stories for scenarios. For example, typical sales scenarios. Nice. Yep. So instructional story design is a perfect methodology for that. Razan, how can you assess learning when you build it as a story? I follow action mapping framework when I design trainings and use scenario-based design approach, but always face this question from internal stakeholders. What about assessments, testing? What is the proof they learned? So how can I counter such an argument? Good. So Razan, Kathy Moore's action mapping technique is the perfect, it's totally in sync with instructional story design. So instructional story design is performance-based. What actions are you asking people to perform? And if you use action mapping, you're going to have a wonderful, and we'll talk about the action list in just a moment. And you'll be able to train people to do those concrete actions. For assessing those actions, because those actions are observable actions, then assessments such as the kinds of assessments that you can do as a trainer may be different than the kind of assessment that the manager can do. the manager can see some output, like see what metrics are already out there in the business that you can do before and after comparisons with. If it's, quality metrics, that might be something that the business will offer. Okay, here's our current, benchmark for our quality, and this is where we are right now. And then as a result of training, how much difference is there in the quality of that person's work? So if it's in operations, if it's, producing a product and the product is flawed because of the way someone is operating, how then has that changed in the business since they took the training? The types of assessments that you can do on your side, survey-wise, is, knowledge, skills, and attitudes before, knowledge, skills, and attitudes after. So what is their confidence? That's knowledge and skills. What is their attitude, or that's, motivation? How important do they think it is to do those skills before and after? That's my short answer to assessments. Laura, we are in the midst of training new processes within our HR software. Difficult to come up with stories in this scenario. Yep. Software training, it may be the type of software training where it is like, just show me what button to push. Or it could be that they need to see, as Jamie was saying, they need to see the downstream impacts of um, doing things an incorrect way. So one thing you need to do, Laura, is really do the analysis beforehand. Is there a business outcome for this training? Is there a root problem? If everybody is adapting to the new process well, maybe no training is needed. But if there is a problem, find out what those common missteps are in using the software and really focus on training them on those things. Okay. Thank you guys for sharing. If you wouldn't mind just typing in the chat the type of technical training that you design and develop. Okay, manufacturing processes, platform training. Karime, hey, it's good to see you. Software development and tooling. Sales training. Interesting. I haven't heard sales training referred to as technical, but there are definitely some technical aspects of it if they're using Salesforce or some sort of, technical or applications. There's a lot of them that salespeople need to know how to operate. Resort property management systems, Kathleen, yep. Amanda, patient education for cancer patients. ERP software training, new company coming into our state, entry-level awareness for new employees, software training, technician training, RV products. Cool. My parents don't have an RV, but they are definitely in that community. They have like a, I don't know, fifth wheel camper or something. Vicky, manufacturing from machine techs, engineers, financial institution system training. Yeah, okay, so you guys get to spend a lot of time doing fun technical stuff, getting into the weeds of all this data and all of the technical elements. So I'd like to show you an application of instructional design that really any of these, telecommunications, time card software, Jamie, requisition and ordering, hospitality software systems, how instructional store design can be applied to any of these technical training efforts. Okay. Once I find my slide deck, I'll be able to share it with you. Here it is. All right. So when I think about technical training, I think about safety training, operations, applications. You've named all of these things in the chat. The first stage of instructional story design is arguably the most important, and that is the discover stage. And if you use the ADDIE model as a framework for training, this would be analysis. You're discovering what the business outcome is. What should the result be? What should those metrics be at the end of this training? You're discovering what the root problem is. What is the problem out in the workforce that we're trying to overcome with this training? And you're discovering if training is actually the best solution for that root problem. If it's a knowledge, skills, or attitude issue, then training can help with that. And once you have determined the business outcome, the root problem, and if training is the right solution, then you go into the next stage of discover, and there are two artifacts that you need to walk away with during the discover stage. One of them is called the audience profile. The other is called the action list. The list of actions that people need to take as a result of training. And we're going to look at both of these assets separately and then see how it's applied in a course. First, let's look at the audience profile. When I'm designing for a new audience, when I'm speaking to a new audience, when I'm doing consulting for a new audience, I will always ask upfront these types of questions. What do they value? What are their current circumstances? How are they reacting to those current circumstances? What do they fear? What do they do in their spare time? I want to know more than just what is their position, demographic information about the audience. That's important and that can be helpful. But I want to go one level down to get at the humanness of this audience. And when I get the answers to this question, I will be answering the biggest question, which is, how will training benefit them personally? Is the training that I'm designing going to speak to their values? Is it going to acknowledge their current circumstances and how they're reacting to those circumstances? Is it going to diminish some of their fears? And maybe what they do in their spare time will make it into the story that I'm developing for training. So this is the audience profile. And once you get to know your learning audience, you'll design better. You'll make design choices that are really going to resonate with this audience. And I'll show you how in just a moment. The second artifact that needs to be created is the action list. You may call this a task list, learning objectives. I call it an action list. My team calls it an action list. I train my stakeholders to call it an action list for a very specific reason, which we will talk about right now. Because often when you are approached by or when you interview a subject matter expert, often they will, and you say, what do people need to do as a result of training? They may answer something like this. Kelly, you are shaking your head. You're like, yeah. Or they may say something like this. And they may say something like this. But there is something inherently missing from all three of these statements. What is it? What's missing in these statements from the subject matter expert? Yes, Michelle, you nailed it. There's no action here. There's nothing for the learner to actually do. So Trish, when you say that's what makes my job so hard, I don't have access to this info, and usually the new employees come from different backgrounds, levels of experience. You may not know who the people are that are coming in, but there's got to be somebody in your workplace who does know. And so that's where our consulting skills come to the forefront. And that's a lot of that is relationship building, really making the connections in the business so that we do know who to ask to make sure that we're getting the information that we need about our audience and definitely about the actions. So back to the action list. When somebody comes to you, a subject matter expert says they need to be aware of our SOPs, then I would say something like, okay, what does someone who is aware of your standard operational procedures do? What do they do? So what I'm looking for is observable actions. Observable actions. Drill down to those observable actions. Use strong verbs. Put the actions in a logical order. Ask the subject matter expert if you've got it right. And often the subject matter expert will be like, wow, I didn't even know that was my process. However, with technical training, your subject matter expert probably does know how to put together an action list. There are logical steps in order of how to do things. So that's the advantage of technical training, is that you have some pretty solid action lists already made for you. You can go through that action list yourself, see if there are any gaps, see if things look out of order, work with your subject matter expert to make sure you've got it right. So Michelle, how would this apply to awareness training? In the same way. You still drill down to observable actions.
No, I was thinking if they say to be aware, you could ask them how would they apply this awareness to their job. I didn't put in the rest of my thought. It was in my head. Sorry about that.
That's okay, Michelle. Yeah. You could ask, what does somebody who is aware of this do? And then one very sneaky way I like to get subject matter experts involved is through storytelling. When might they be in a situation where they have to be aware of this? And they might say, well, when they're, on the manufacturing floor. Okay, let's give this person a name. Let's call this person, Jacob. When Jacob's on the manufacturing floor, when might they encounter this? Oh, well, when they are walking by this particular machine, right? Then what do they do next? Well, they would, and you get them involved in telling you step by step what the person would do. And then often at the end, I'll be like, you know what? You just created a great story. I think we should include that in the training. They're like, oh yeah, I had a great idea. So it's a great way to kind of, through the back door, get them involved in storytelling from the beginning. This action list really forms the backbone of your training and the audience profile. So let's see how these two artifacts fit into the story design model. We talked about the two elements of story. Go ahead and type them in the chat. What are they? What are the two elements of a story that make it a story? This is a test. Yes, that's the first one, relatable characters. So, and strong conflict is the other one. Excellent. So where did we get these relatable characters from? We get them from the audience profile. Now that we know who our learning audience is, we can create characters who look, feel that this learning audience will have empathy for. They don't have to be exact replicas of the learning audience, but they have to have some relatability. The second, strong conflict. Now that we have this list of observable actions, we can put the relatable characters in conflict with those observable actions. And boom, we've got a tailor-made story for this course. And it will produce a very targeted desire for resolution, and we can follow that up with instruction. Now, let's take a step back and look at this process from the beginning. Subject matter expert or stakeholder comes, says, we need technical training for fill in the blank, right? So we're going to use wireless technology as our example. You're like, you know what, our leaders need some training on wireless technology. So can you give us something? Sure. And these are the things that they need to know. Now, when you read through these things, what strikes you about this? What comes to your mind when you see this list? Yes, Katerina. Well said. A list of nouns. Knowledge, no action. Exactly. A lot of stuff. Yeah, Trish. Exactly. But a content dump, Priya, you know. But often, not you, of course, the go-to is to just take this and run with it. And what that produces is a course that looks a little bit like this. Here's our wireless network course. Here's the first slide. Okay. Here's the second slide. Oh, look what a good job this designer has done to chunk all of this information into different tabs. Isn't this exciting? Ooh, here's a scenario. The interesting little graphic. And here's another scenario. And I mean, you follow this up with maybe a knowledge check and an assessment, and boom, you have, completed this wonderful course. You are good to go. You are ready to go. But how does that leave you feeling? How would a course like that make you feel? Vague, overwhelmed, tired, bored, sleepy. Jamie is already asleep. Yeah, empty, fatigue, unsatisfied. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Disengaged, that's another good one. Good, frustrated. 2 weeks later, no one will remember the content. I think that's pretty generous, Laura. 2 weeks. Katerina, time waster almost. Okay, good. Yeah, these types of courses are in abundance. Abundance. You can get these types of courses in so like they're a dime a dozen. But what if we were to apply something that humanized this technical learning experience? And we took time to understand who this audience is, who these leaders are that we are training for technical training, and we had an action list. So one way to approach this type of technical training is to take what was given to us. Okay, this is what they need to know. But we don't stop there. We create an action list by adding a little bit of an addition to what they need to know. So you can. This is what you need to know so you can communicate, discuss, interpret, make intelligent decisions. Now we have observable actions that we can train people on. And probably, each of these 4 points would have some sub actions underneath them to, flesh it out just a bit. But now we have something that we can actually train these leaders to do. So I'd like to share with you an example of a very short piece of a course for technical training for this particular audience, for leaders who need to know this technical information so that they can do these things on the right. Right? Would you like to see it? Of course you would, because you've got a desire for resolution. You'll see what I did there? All right. So this is the beginning of the course. It starts, of course, with a story. So let's peek into this story, see how it goes, and then we'll continue through the rest of the course.
We need to make a decision about how much we're going to invest in new systems to make sure we're ready for 5G.
All right. What are the recommendations?
Well, we're going to need more local units since low latency and high data rates are 5G requirements.
We've already got a surplus of BBUs. Can't we repurpose those?
BBUs?
Yeah, can't we just...
That's 4G. 5G uses central and distributed units.
So... okay.
Traffic comes through the GNB central unit and sends it to the local UPF. What we need to determine is how much to invest in the local virtualized edge components.
Virtual.
Yeah, edge computing.
How quickly do we need to make this decision?
Okay, so after watching Barry, who is the manager, with one of his direct reports in this conversation, let's go to the next slide, and because there's a question I want you to answer here. Good, Katerina. Yes. He doesn't have a clue. Yep. So how do you think he feels here? Unprepared, all of the above. It really is all of the above. It could be any one of these. So really the purpose of this question is not to test. It's to give them an opportunity to reflect on the story, particularly the emotional impact of the story. So the learner here can choose any one of them. Why do you think he feels this way? Go ahead and type your answer in the chat. Yes, yes. You're not sure about the new tech, doesn't seem to know to understand the knowledge. Good. Yep, all of those are spot on. The learner can put their, um, yes, Kaylin, good. Kathleen, yep. So they may put something like this: he doesn't feel equipped with the technical knowledge he needs to help make his team make a sound decision. Then the answer here that the person made, it gets inserted as a variable on the next slide at the top. And then we have these 3 areas that we're going to explore. These correspond to the action list, right? And so we're going to go into the first one on the left here, the communicate confidently to his team. And they're going to get to practice using their technical knowledge or lack thereof. So here's the first question where there is a right or wrong answer. And you'll see on the right-hand side, we have an excerpt from the story. And the question is quite simple. How should you respond? Right? We don't need a big, lengthy explanation because we've already seen the story play out. We're bringing that story back in and asking the question. So, if the learner answers A, then they get detailed feedback, not just on that's not right, but why the answer is incorrect. That's right, Katarina, not the BBUs. And we have this graphic too to help the leader understand even further how it works. So they can consult this 5G network job aid, which contains the information that they need to, it would be like the action list basically, to answer the question. And they can answer, and when they get it correct, then they get some very detailed feedback on why the answer was correct. So the way this was set up is a story was told. The learner was given opportunity to reflect, solve, and give feedback. Yep, that's right. That's right, Katerina. You learn what not to use. That's the non-example, right? The story is the non-example. And so we saw this through the story. Yep, the feedback. We'll get to the feedback in just a second, Vicki. Reflect. We saw that in this course. The solve piece. This is where they can mess up and get valuable feedback on their work. So you'll notice that the training, the telling, rather than tell, test, now we have a story, a chance to reflect, a chance to solve. So far, the learner is doing a lot of critical thinking. Then the feedback, and that is where the telling takes place. Time flies when you are having fun with your buds. I can't believe it's the top of the hour already. So let me ask you your thoughts on instructional story designed technical training. Love it. It's exciting, isn't it? It's an exciting way to design. It's an exciting way to train. And I'd like to just point out some of the things that you said at the beginning, just bring them back. Help give the learner an opportunity to discover the action list for themselves. Don't just give it all to them. Let them critically think to unearth, correct solutions. And then let them feel the consequences. So Jamie mentioned this at the beginning. Let them feel the consequence, the downstream consequences of technical training gone wrong. And that can be an application training, it can be an operations training, it can be a safety training. Let them feel, those downstream impacts. For those of you who are interested in like really taking this next level, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Oh, thank you, Michelle. This is a link to the Instructional Story Design Certification track. And if you would like to get started on your road to certification, the first course that I offer is called the Instructional Story Design Experience, where you design a course for a client. And you'll go through that entire process from interviews all the way through to a finished product. And then the second step is one-on-one mentorship, where you produce a story of your own, a story-based course on your own for work or for your portfolio. Thank you so, so much for spending this hour with me. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you for sharing your insights, your experience on this call. And I look forward to seeing you on the School of Story Design in the future. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.